Thank you for staying with Sunrise, and if you're just joining us, welcome to our Women's World discussion. This morning, our topic looks at nurture versus nature, women and their environment, or upbringing then versus now, and the lost aim of having the village raising the child. Let's welcome Heneka Watkis-Porter. She's a podcast producer, coach, author, and speaker, and Natasha Wright. She's an HR and leadership consultant. Good morning, ladies. Welcome to Sunrise.
Good morning, Angelique, and thank you for having us.
I'm very happy to have this conversation with you, Heneka and Natasha. Nature versus nurture. When we think about nurturing as women and how we are shaped, let's start by saying, what are some of the things, Heneka, that comes to mind when you think of nurture?
So when I think about nurture, I think about the care and the upbringing or environment that we grew up in, and we have been raised as women to behave a particular way, to think a particular thing, and to be, and so sometimes we have to, as women, not sometimes, we always have to push the boundaries and push past the expectations, the traditional expectations, even as women, of being in the home and remaining in the home. And it's all about that. And you're not supposed to be aspiring to be the best that you can be. So that's one of the things that certainly we've had to push through. And even as we consider the nurture versus nature argument, there is also the third component that we need to consider as well, and that is epigenetics. But as we progress into the conversation, we can get into that.
All right. Is it that there are moments in nurturing, perhaps in your experience or in the experience of persons you know, that go against a woman's true nature, or that tries to change or alter a woman's true nature? Are we being nurtured against what we can truly be or think?
So I know particularly in the business world, because as an entrepreneur, right, you are expected, excuse me, as a woman, because you're supposed to be the softer sex, right? You're supposed to not be as aggressive. You're not supposed. So when women pursue a particular path in leadership, in entrepreneurship, you can be seen as aggressive. You can be seen as overbearing and even be too much. Whereas when you compare, for example, how a man is expected to behave, it is seen as acceptable behavior, normal behavior, and it's not questioned. He's not called that B word that women are often called, because they are, reaching for the stars and to break that proverbial glass ceiling. So it's different, and the expectations are actually different. In the home, you're expected to be always subservient. You're expected to be the one doing the household chores. So the expectations, societal expectations and norms, we have to keep pushing past those boundaries.
Natasha, what about you in terms of when you think about how you've been nurtured? Did it always feed what you believe is your natural nature? Or are there moments when how you were nurtured went against what you believe you were naturally capable of being and thinking?
I absolutely love this question, and I have to piggyback off of what Heneka said not long ago. The truth is, how we were raised, our genetics, all of that has much to do with how we go about life. And I have found myself in different circumstances playing on, nurture and not nature. For example, I went through a series of tragedy as a young girl. At the age of 10, I lost my dad. 15, lost my mom and grandmother afterwards. Because of that, I must tell you, I should be by nature more, emotional, more receptive to certain instances or occasions where, things should play on my emotional aspect. But because of what has happened to me in the past, I'm somehow on the frigid side. And I have to share it because not many women can be transparent about this. When you are in certain environments, it actually shapes how you react to your challenges or different circumstances. Similarly to the business world, because I've been in business for some time, I may not react as some other persons to, varying issues. So yes, I found that when I should be acting based on based on nature, I'm acting on the nurture side. Or if I should be, doing it vice versa, it's all mixed up because the environment and past experience has played such a huge part in how we react to different issues.
Such an interesting perspective there, Natasha. I want you to tell me a little bit more about how those difficult experiences now that nurtured you were translated into positives for you, and how did you do that? How did you channel that, what happened, what could have nurtured you negatively into something, Natasha, that nurtured you positively?
Indeed. So, for example, again, because of going through different harsh circumstances, it really should have caused me to become a failure or want to give up on life. But instead, I think it has fueled me to instead want to do more or become more, and also to inspire people to want the same. And so I think that actually it did a 360 on me, instead of causing me to be pitiful, to be relying on the opposite sex to, because we are raised, and society says that as a female, you ought to be relying on the opposite sex for protection, for care, for guidance, everything else. But not many of them are independent or want to be independent. And I think that in this case, it has actually helped me to believe that, yes, I can, believe that I can do and be the best that I can be.
Awesome. Heneka, you were just about to make a comment a short while ago. Let's hear it in terms of nurturing and how we channel it into positives instead of just falling into the cookie cutter that often is how women are nurtured.
Absolutely. So when things happen to you, when you've experienced tragedy of any sorts, right, you can take one of two roads. You can either, as Natasha alluded to, you can either decide, boy, I'm going to give up on life, you know what I mean, because nothing go on and things just rough and the whole world is against me kind of vibe. Or, as Natasha did, you can challenge that into being the best that you can possibly be. So I may not have gone through the exact circumstances that Natasha would have, but I've had my own fair share of struggles, challenges, trauma. I mean, I've spoken about them on several different platforms: sexual abuse, depression, all kinds of things. You feel, neglect and everything that you can think of, loss and grief and all of that. And yet, for me, instead of choosing the road of woe is me, you know what I mean? I have chosen to channel all of that into a very positive direction. And so I lived the life of life transformation through inspiration. And that has been my personal mission for a very long time. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, given all the things that I have had to go through, when you look at me, you should be able to live vicariously through my eyes to say, if she can do that, then I can do it too. And it has not been easy. I'm not going to paint a picture as, yes, you're either going to choose one or the other, and it's just going to be like that. It's not a simple thing. It's a decision. It's a choice that you make. And even when your feelings are going against what you think is right, you're feeling down, you don't feel like going, you don't feel like you need to continue, you don't feel like, you're living purposefully. Even when you're feeling those moments, one thing I always say is that feelings lie, and you must fight through those feelings. Rest if you must, because I've had to stop and rest, and it's absolutely necessary, but you have to continue. You cannot ever allow your circumstances to dictate where you go in life, because you are outside of, God giving you life, and He's a creator. Outside of that, you are indeed the CEO of your life, and you're responsible for that.
Absolutely. From time to time, we have to have heads of department committee meetings with ourselves and address certain breaches and fire some people and get some new hires as we consult with our own self. I agree with you, Heneka. No, you touched on something, Natasha, concerning how you channeled your experiences positively, and one of the results was that you became more independent and were not dependent on the opposite sex. And so right there, sometimes as women lean into their nature, we're divine, strong, powerful, able to shape and change our lives, men begin to feel as though there is no room for them in our lives because we suddenly do not seem to need them. How do we balance how does the woman who is leaning into her true self, her true nature, how does she find the balance to include a partnership with the opposite sex?
Yes, no, it's so funny that you asked that question because I did not start this transformation until after I got married. When I realized that I was definitely on the, higher end of the masculinity spectrum in terms of how I react. Yes, it is. I'm telling you the absolute truth. And then, you mentioned being the CEO of your life. You have to decide when you're going to fire, when you're going to hire, when you need to make that change. And I decided that, listen, I could no longer continue just being purely nurture and, very little of me nature. And so I said, you know what, let me start looking at how I, respond at times. Sometimes, and I'm being completely honest, sometimes I would say to my husband, oh, babes, could you do this for me? And if he didn't move within 5-10 minutes, I'd be gone doing it myself. And I realized it would have been it's such a turn off to any male, whether it's in a working environment, whether it is that you're in a school environment, your home, your marriage, your friends. We have to be conscious that our males desire respect above all else. And it has to do with how we react to them and how we speak to them. And so I have had to do introspection and make adjustments accordingly. I used to work in an environment where all my subordinates were males. Most of them were males. And so I couldn't ask them to do things and say, hey, make sure you do that and do it on time and don't let me have anything. I couldn't respond to them like that. Instead, I would have to have a conversation and say, hey, I'm having a challenge. How can you assist me? I need your help. All these different things. And I've had to learn that our males desire respect. We, on the other hand, as females, we desire love. And the communication, between the two will sound different to them when they hear it. And so I need to be careful. Don't be disrespectful. Be mindful of how I say things and don't try to be everything to yourself. Yes. So I've had to go through that process, and it's very important for us all to know because our males are our males are important. They're foundational in terms of the family, and they are in fact the ones who are the head of the household. Not many would agree, but yes, we need our males in the society.
Absolutely. It seems, therefore, Heneka, that the woman who is leaning into her true nature understands her power and her strength and her capacity to lead and determine her own life, but is also aware of the importance of partnership. So is it that we are more dependent and more collaborative? We need collaboration and partnership more than we think in our true nature, or are we truly capable of just doing it by ourselves?
No man is an island. No man stands alone. And when I listen to Natasha, I smile, and I'm smiling because there's just so much of what she's saying I can identify with because, and again, perhaps our circumstance would have shaped us. And that shaped me into being somebody who was very callous, I can tell you, because when you've been through a lot of things, I think what you do as a self protection mechanism is to go, is to be cold because you don't want to let anybody in. You don't want to allow people to help you. But part of being a woman and one who recognizes her power and her worth is her ability to pull back when necessary. And that is a big part of leadership. Leadership is not always shouting from the front. It's sometimes you being at the back, pushing persons forward, giving that support, recognizing when you need to pull back. Think to yourself, am I going too hard here? Where does emotional intelligence comes in? And that's also important. So not just emotional intelligence, but your spiritual intelligence. What is your intuition saying to you at this very moment? So it's about leaning into your full self, not just your emotions. Because sometimes, as I allude to, your emotion will lie to you and tell you one thing when the reality is stating something completely different. And so it's important to be able to collaborate, not compete, right? We're not competing. Men and women, we are two totally different creatures. We complement each other, or should complement each other, not be competitive. And at one point, I can tell you, I wasn't always thinking this way. I always think something I need nobody. I can do everything for my one and I'm good, right?
Absolutely.
But I've had to come into that self-awareness to know that I need my husband. And when Natasha said, wait, she used to ask her husband to do something in 5 minutes and him don't move, she do it. Oh, Lord God. I can so relate. I'm doing it all until there was a point when I became burnt out and I realized, hey, you can't do this all on your own. Yeah. You really need to just sit back and relax sometimes and let your partner or whomever it is help you, because we need that.
Absolutely. A wise gentleman said to me recently, allow yourself to be assisted. It does not remove from you any capacity or agency, because you are permitting yourself to be assisted. Sounds very simple, sounds easy to do, but it's a mark of a wise woman, because not all of us are able to understand that without feeling that we're giving up a part of ourselves. But it's a journey, as both of you have mentioned. Now, I want to touch a little bit, just before we end the conversation, on the pandemic and how it seems to have disproportionately affected women as opposed to men, because women, especially who have children, have found that the burden of caregiving and nurturing became something that came into sharp focus as the children were at home. Natasha, from your experience, how did that nurture-nature relationship with the children, the partner, what are some of the lessons that COVID taught you about yourself and what comes naturally to you as opposed to nurturing in that situation? Tell me a little bit about that experience.
Most definitely, Angelique. Throughout the pandemic, I was one of those who thought I was going to go crazy because everything converged into one. My speaking engagements, my consultancy, my daughter going to school, my husband, he would have his own business to do, and we're all doing it in the same space. It took such a huge toll on me, because then when I really should have been focused on work, I was in Ami's class. And while I was in Ami's class, I was so perturbed that she wasn't paying attention in school. And so it took a really huge toll on me, because now I said, you know what, I need to pay more attention to her. I need to ensure that throughout this whole process, her headspace is in the right place and she wasn't adversely affected by not being around her friends, and then trying to mind my own emotional plane. As Heneka said, sometimes emotions lie, and especially when you are isolated, that's when it takes a major toll on you. So I found myself doing a lot of backflips and just growing through the process.
Yes, I can imagine. It takes a village, we've often heard, Heneka. And I think the pandemic showed us, as you rightly mentioned, that no man is an island. And on this journey of becoming our true selves, leaning into our true nature while being influenced by the things that have happened, which is nurture, How important has that been in the pandemic for you? What are your thoughts from pandemic time?
So having recognized, because sometimes we can be so judgmental of, of each other, because you don't know my situation, I don't know yours. I'm in my world, you're in yours, and you're doing your own thing. And we're judging each other because of what we see each other do. But then here comes a global occurrence that has impacted all of us the very same way at the very same time. It didn't matter who you were. It didn't matter who you are. You recognize that we need each other. We recognized then that we needed help. And it became clear to us that we needed help because we could now put myself in the other person's shoe and we could empathize. And not only empathizing, because when you're empathizing, you're not necessarily in that person's shoe, but you're actually living their reality and you realize you're doing the same thing at the same time. And for me too, personally, it was even more than that because the impact of a pandemic didn't really hit me until perhaps last year, because for the greater part of it, I was trying to save my own life because I was battling, a life and death experience where my health is concerned. So I had no time to really focus on that. But then after a while, it became real to me, and perhaps it also took a longer time as well because I always worked from home for a long time. So nothing really changed. I was doing things, I hardly go on the road and stuff. But one thing that was clear was that we were all impacted and that I needed to reach out to persons, even in my own situation. Natasha is one of those persons who has been in my corner, and such a beautiful soul. So I know I needed people and I needed to reach out to people, and I was able to give support as well to others.
And isn't that our highest natural calling to serve each other truly? When we are our best as humankind is when we realize our capacity to give of ourselves, and having done it, realize that we are no less for it. One of the ways that many women give of themselves, and it is considered one of the highest callings, Natasha, is in motherhood. There's some people who think that women therefore are natural nurturers. But for you, how have you balanced observing and encouraging the natural nature of your child while actively nurturing your child? How do you balance that as a mom?
Powerful question, because I always tell people that my daughter is retribution. So my own, it's like me with a different face, but we're very similar. And sometimes when she says things, it is a nudge that I need to adjust the way I speak to her, because she is not quiet or reserved. When I say something, she will say, "Oh, mommy, that was so hurtful," or "I'm disappointed that you did so and so." And so it gives me the opportunity to change, or it gives me the opportunity to explain. And I must say this to all the mothers out there. We know that when we were raised, there were some things lacking. It is our responsibility to ensure that our children are growing with the necessities. I'm not talking about, the nice house and somewhere to sleep. Yes, it's included, but just to ensure that they are grounded emotionally, spiritually, and that you're present in the home. Some of us, our minds are on business. We're always gone because we're worrying about providing all the materialistic things. But those things that are lacking, that are affecting us now, our self-esteem, how we look at life, all these different things, we need to ensure that we give it to our children. And that is something that I ensure that I do. My daughter is 8 years old. She's very young, but I already started having the conversation about, hey, you have to love yourself. Don't try to be like anybody else. And we go through all those different things. So yes, both sides play a part, the nurturing side, because I have to share my experiences, not in in full detail, she's not ready yet, but I have to share in different ways. Stories are a great way for kids to understand things. And then on the nature side, give her all the love and support I possibly can as a mother.
That is where we have to end this morning, Natasha. Thank you so much. Thank you, Heneka Watkis-Porter. She's a podcast producer, coach, author, and speaker. Natasha Wright, who we heard from last, she's an HR and leadership consultant. They joined us this morning for Woman's World.
Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the notification bell so that you are kept up to date with all of our news, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle content.